My name is Cassandra Mitchell, and until 3 months ago, I was a 28-year-old biotech researcher with loving parents and a promising future. Then came the crash that shattered my body and revealed the truth. The people who raised me were never my parents at all. They left me to die in that hospital bed, but what they really wanted was my inheritance. What they found instead was a letter that would destroy their carefully constructed lies forever. If you're watching this from somewhere around the world, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below. Trust me, you'll want to hear how I discovered my entire life was built on deception. I grew up in Brookline, a wealthy suburb just outside Boston. My childhood home was a colonial with perfectly manicured hedges and a two-car garage where my father parked his Mercedes next to my mother's Audi. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family. Robert Mitchell was a financial advisor with his own firm, and Eleanor Mitchell worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative. They were respected in our community, active in local charity events, and seemingly devoted to their only daughter. My earliest memories are filled with piano lessons, science camps, and academic competitions. While other kids spent summers at the pool or the mall, I was enrolled in advanced mathematics programs and biology workshops. My parents never missed an opportunity to brag about my intelligence. "Our Cassandra is special," they would tell neighbors at barbecues. "She's going to change the world someday." The pressure to excel was relentless. B-plus grades were met with disappointment, not celebration. "Mitchells don't settle for average," my father would say. My mother would add, "We've invested too much in you to waste your potential." That word, invested, should have been my first clue. When I was around 12, I became curious about baby pictures. We had family albums filled with photos of me from age 3 onward, but nothing earlier. When I asked my mother about it, she told me they'd lost everything in a basement flood before moving to our current house. It seemed plausible enough at the time. More inconsistencies appeared as I grew older. Neither of my parents had my auburn hair or green eyes. When I asked about this in biology class during our genetics unit, they claimed I'd inherited my looks from my maternal grandmother. I never met this grandmother. She had passed away before I was born, they said, but she had apparently left me a substantial trust fund that would become accessible when I turned 25. There were other oddities too. My birth certificate seemed newer than expected when I needed it for my driver's license application. My mother became strangely emotional when I had blood work done for a sports physical in high school. My father changed the subject whenever I mentioned wanting to try one of those ancestry DNA tests that became popular a few years ago. Despite my academic achievements, my true passion was art. I loved painting. Abstract expressionism that allowed me to escape the rigid structure of my life. When I mentioned wanting to study fine arts in college, my parents reacted with uncharacteristic anger. My father called it a waste of potential, and my mother actually cried, saying I was throwing away everything they'd worked for. Their reactions seemed extreme, even for them. I ended up at MIT studying biochemistry and molecular biology. It wasn't my dream, but I did find aspects of it fascinating, particularly in medical applications. By my second year, I had discovered a genuine interest in biomedical research, specifically targeted drug therapies for cancer treatment. I graduated with honors and immediately began work on my PhD. At 25, my life changed significantly when I gained access to my inheritance, $4.5 million from my maternal grandmother. My parents seemed both nervous and excited when this happened. They immediately suggested I invest most of it through my father's firm, but something in their eagerness made me uncomfortable. Instead, I used a portion to fund my own research, invested the bulk with an independent financial advisor, and purchased a modest but comfortable condo in Cambridge. This decision created the first serious rift between us. My father was furious that I hadn't trusted him with my finances. My mother kept calling with investment opportunities that required quick cash. Over the next 3 years, they approached me repeatedly about loans for various business ventures. A restaurant franchise, a real estate development, a tech startup. Each proposal was vaguer than the last, and my refusals made our already strained relationship even more tense. Despite this, I continued to see them for holidays and occasional dinners. They were my parents, after all. The only family I had. Or so I thought. By 28, I had established myself as a promising researcher in targeted cancer therapies. My work had been published in several prestigious journals, and I had just received a substantial grant to continue my research. I was making real progress on a new treatment protocol that showed remarkable results in preliminary trials. For the first time, I felt I was truly making a difference in the world, even if it wasn't the path I would have chosen for myself. Then came the conference in New York. I presented my latest research to enthusiastic reception and was driving back to Boston late on a Friday night. The rain was coming down in sheets, reducing visibility on the highway. I remember checking my GPS, noting I was about an hour from home. That's the last thing I remember before waking up in the hospital. My life forever changed. The first sensation was pain, sharp, throbbing, all-encompassing pain. I couldn't move without feeling like my body was being torn apart. Through the haze of semi-consciousness, I became aware of beeping machines and the antiseptic smell of hospital disinfectant. My eyes wouldn't open fully, but I could make out blurry figures moving around the room. Multiple fractures to the femur and pelvis. Internal bleeding. Possible spinal injury. She needs surgery immediately. A male voice, a doctor, I assumed. I tried to speak, but something was in my throat. A breathing tube. I could only listen as footsteps approached my bed. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, we need your consent for emergency surgery. The internal bleeding is severe, and we're concerned about permanent damage to her organs if we don't operate immediately. There was a pause. I expected to hear immediate agreement from my parents. Instead, my father's voice came through, strangely detached. We need to discuss this privately first. Footsteps again, moving away from my bed toward the door. I strained to hear, fighting against the pain medication that threatened to pull me back under. I don't understand why we need to authorize anything. My mother's voice unnaturally cold. She's an adult. Let her make her own decisions when she wakes up. Mrs. Mitchell, your daughter may not wake up without the surgery. The injuries are life-threatening. Look, doctor. My father now, his voice hushed, but clear enough for me to hear. There's something you should know. She's not our real daughter. The words hit me harder than the crash had. Not their real daughter? What was he talking about? I don't understand, the doctor said, confusion evident in his tone. We raised her, but she's not biologically ours, my mother explained with clinical detachment. We have no legal responsibility here. But you're listed as her next of kin, the doctor insisted. A formality, my father replied dismissively. We're not authorizing potentially expensive procedures for someone who isn't our blood. Besides, she has a substantial estate. Her medical expenses should come from that. My mind reeled. Not their daughter? No legal responsibility? My estate? They were refusing life-saving surgery while discussing my money? If you won't authorize treatment, we'll need to locate another relative or her designated healthcare proxy, the doctor said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Do what you need to do, my father replied. But we won't be financially responsible. I heard my mother's voice next, lower now, clearly not intended for the doctor. Do you think we need to be concerned about the inheritance if she doesn't make it? We should talk to Lawrence about that, my father whispered back, referring to his attorney. Find out our options. They were discussing my death and their access to my money while I lay potentially dying just feet away. The realization was so shocking, so painful, that I felt my consciousness slipping again. A new voice entered the conversation, a woman, firm and professional. Excuse me, Dr. Patel needs you to sign these forms declining responsibility so we can pursue alternative authorization. I'm Grace, the charge nurse. Papers rustled. Pens scratched on paper. We'll be going now, my mother said. Call us if there's any change in her condition. You're leaving? Nurse Grace's voice held unmistakable judgment. "We have other obligations," my father replied stiffly. "You have our contact information." Footsteps receded. A door opened and closed. They were gone. They had left me to die. I drifted in and out of consciousness after that. Later, I learned that the hospital had contacted my emergency contacts, finding my friend Madison's number in my phone. Madison arrived within an hour, authorized the surgery, and stayed by my side throughout the night. The next few days passed in a blur of surgeries, pain medication, and brief moments of lucidity. Madison was there each time I opened my eyes, sometimes sleeping in the chair beside my bed, sometimes talking quietly with the medical staff. But my parents never returned. When I was finally alert enough to understand what had happened, Madison held my hand as she explained. "They just left, Cass. They haven't called. They haven't come back. I tried reaching them myself, but they won't answer. They said I wasn't their real daughter," I whispered, my voice raw from the breathing tube that had been removed the day before. Madison's eyes widened. "What?" "I heard them. They told the doctor I wasn't their biological daughter, that they had no legal responsibility for me." The words felt unreal coming from my mouth. Madison's expression shifted from shock to fury. "Those monsters. You nearly died, Cass. The doctors said if they'd waited even an hour longer for the surgery." She didn't need to finish. I understood how close I had come to death, not just from the accident, but from my parents' callous abandonment. "Did you know?" Madison asked gently. "About not being their biological child?" I shook my head, then winced at the pain the movement caused. "No, never. I mean, I had questions sometimes, but they always had explanations. The physical pain of my injuries, a shattered femur, fractured pelvis, internal bleeding, 3 broken ribs, and a concussion, was almost welcome compared to the emotional devastation. The people who had raised me, who I had loved despite their flaws, had walked away when I needed them most. And, from what I had overheard, their concern had been for my money, not my life. In the days that followed, I asked Madison to try contacting them again. Each call went to voicemail. Each text went unanswered. It was as if they had disappeared from my life the moment they realized I might die and take their access to my inheritance with me. Nurse Grace became another source of support during those dark days. She had witnessed my parents' betrayal firsthand and seemed to take a special interest in my case. She brought me extra Jell-O cups, sat with me during her breaks, and made sure the night staff kept a close eye on me. "I've been a nurse for 20 years, she told me one evening while checking my vitals. "I've seen families under terrible stress. I've seen them argue and break down. But I've never seen parents just walk away like that. Neither had I." And as the fog of medication began to clear, as the reality of my situation settled in, I realized I needed answers. Not just about why they had abandoned me in the hospital, but about everything. About who I really was. By the end of my first week in the hospital, I had graduated from the ICU to a regular room. The immediate danger had passed, but my recovery had just begun. Physical therapy sessions twice daily left me exhausted and in pain. The doctors talked about months of rehabilitation before I would walk normally again. But while my body was broken, my mind was clearer than it had been in years. "I need my laptop," I told Madison during one of her daily visits. She had been bringing me clothes, books, and food that wasn't hospital-issued. "Are you sure that's a good idea? You should be resting." "I can't just lie here with my thoughts, Mads. I need answers." The next day, she brought my laptop and set it up on the adjustable table over my bed. "Just promise you won't overdo it," she said. As soon as she left, I began searching. First, I looked up my own birth records in the Massachusetts database. According to the certificate on file, I had been born at Boston Memorial Hospital to Robert and Eleanor Mitchell. But something about the document looked off. The formatting was slightly different from other certificates from the same year. Next, I searched news archives for any mentions of my parents around the time of my birth. Nothing unusual appeared at first. Then I tried a different approach, searching for infant abductions in the Northeast during the 3 years surrounding my supposed birth date. The results made my blood run cold. 3-month-old Emma Carpenter abducted from home in Providence, Rhode Island. The article, dated June 15, 1995, exactly 3 months after my listed birth date, described how baby Emma had been taken from her crib during the night. Her parents, Thomas and Catherine Carpenter, had awakened to find their daughter missing and a window open. Despite an extensive investigation and nationwide search, the baby was never found. I stared at the grainy newspaper photo accompanying the article. It showed a devastated young couple holding a baby photo. The infant had wisps of auburn hair. My hands trembling, I continued searching. I found more articles about the Carpenter case, including follow-ups on anniversaries of the abduction. In one from 5 years after the kidnapping, Thomas Carpenter was quoted, "We will never stop looking for Emma. Someone, somewhere, knows what happened to our daughter." The most recent article I could find was from just 2 years ago, the 25th anniversary of the abduction. The Carpenters, now in their early 50s, had created a foundation to help families of missing children. They had 2 other children, born after the abduction, but had never given up hope of finding their firstborn. I sat back, my mind spinning. Could I be Emma Carpenter? The timing matched. My earliest memories were from around age 3, after the abduction would have occurred. I had no baby pictures. I didn't resemble my parents. But I needed more than speculation. I needed facts. Over the next few days, I divided my time between painful physical therapy sessions and research. Madison helped, bringing me public records she accessed through her job at the city clerk's office. We discovered that Robert and Eleanor Mitchell had moved from Providence to the Boston area in late 1995, just months after baby Emma's abduction. They had no record of having a child before suddenly appearing in Brookline with a toddler. "You need professional help with this," Madison said after we'd accumulated a substantial file of circumstantial evidence. "I know someone who might be able to help." The next day, she brought a man named Derek Wilson to my hospital room. Derek was a former police detective who now worked as a private investigator. "Madison has filled me in on what you found," he said, sitting in the chair beside my bed. "It's compelling, but not conclusive. You need DNA evidence." "How do I get that?" I asked. "I don't have access to the Carpenter's DNA." "You don't need it yet. First, let's confirm you're not related to the Mitchells. If you're not, we can approach the Carpenter case from there." He explained that we could obtain DNA samples from items my parents had used: hairbrushes, toothbrushes, even coffee cups. But we would need access to their house. "I still have a key," I said. "And I know when they're usually out." 2 days later, with me still confined to the hospital, Madison and Derek entered my parents' home and collected several items. Derek took them to a lab where he had connections. While waiting for results, I continued my physical recovery and consulted with an attorney Madison recommended. Samuel Bennett specialized in identity fraud and inheritance law. "If you are indeed Emma Carpenter and not Cassandra Mitchell, the legal implications are significant," he explained during our first meeting. The Mitchells could face kidnapping charges, identity fraud, and potentially financial crimes if they've been using your identity for monetary gain. "What about my inheritance?" I asked. "The money supposedly from my grandmother?" Samuel's expression turned thoughtful. "That's an interesting question. If there was no biological grandmother, where did that money really come from? We need to trace its origins." A week after our DNA samples were submitted, Derek returned with the results. His expression told me everything before he spoke. "You are definitively not related to Robert or Eleanor Mitchell," he said, handing me the report. "Not by blood, at least." I had suspected it, but seeing scientific confirmation still felt like a physical blow. The people I had called Mom and Dad for 28 years were strangers. "There's more," Derek continued. "I took the liberty of running your DNA through some databases. There's a familial match to samples the Carpenters submitted years ago during the investigation. The probability that you are their biological daughter is over 99%. I stared at him, my world simultaneously falling apart and reassembling into something entirely new. I'm Emma Carpenter. It appears so, he confirmed gently. With this knowledge, Samuel advised me to protect my assets immediately. He helped me change access codes, secure my accounts, and create new powers of attorney for healthcare and finances, naming Madison instead of my parents. They've been trying to access your accounts, Samuel informed me after making some calls. They've claimed you're mentally incompetent due to your injuries and have petitioned for temporary guardianship. That's absurd, Madison said. You're completely lucid. It's a play for control of her money, Samuel explained. And not their first attempt, it seems. I've found evidence they've been siphoning small amounts from your secondary accounts for years, Cassandra, or should I say Emma? The name felt foreign. I wasn't ready for it yet. Derek had continued his investigation into the Mitchells and discovered they were deeply in debt. My father's investment firm had been struggling for years. They had second and third mortgages on their house, credit card debt, failed business ventures, gambling debts in my father's name. They're desperate, Derek concluded, and dangerous. They've booked flights to Indonesia for next week. No extradition treaty with the U.S. They're planning to clean out my accounts and run, I said, the pieces falling into place. That night, in my hospital room, I wrote a letter. A letter containing everything I had learned, everything they had done, and everything that would happen next. It would be waiting for them when they made their final move. After 3 weeks in the hospital, I was discharged into Madison's care. Her 2-bedroom apartment wasn't ideal for someone in a wheelchair, but we made it work. My bedroom was converted into a makeshift recovery room, with my hospital bed taking center stage and my medications organized on the nightstand. The day after I moved in, Samuel visited with disturbing news. They've escalated their efforts, he said, setting his briefcase on Madison's coffee table. They filed an emergency petition claiming your accident caused traumatic brain injury affecting your decision-making capacity. They're seeking immediate conservatorship of your estate. That's ridiculous, Madison said. Her doctors have documented her cognitive functions are normal. They found a doctor willing to testify otherwise without having examined her, Samuel replied grimly. A colleague of Eleanor's from her pharmaceutical days. I wasn't surprised. After everything I'd learned, nothing about Robert and Eleanor Mitchell could shock me anymore. What's more concerning, Samuel continued, is that someone attempted to access your investment accounts yesterday using your social security number and mother's maiden name. How much have they already taken? I asked. Samuel consulted his notes. From what we can trace so far, approximately $87,000 over the past 3 years from your checking and savings accounts. Small enough amounts to stay under the radar. And they want the rest now, I said, the reality of their betrayal still staggering to comprehend. All $4.5 million. Plus your condo, investments, and intellectual property related to your research, Samuel added. Everything. Derek arrived later that afternoon with more revelations from his investigation. He spread photographs across Madison's dining table, images of Robert and Eleanor meeting with various individuals in parking lots and coffee shops. They've been planning this for months, he explained, pointing to timestamps on the photos. These meetings began shortly after you received the research grant. This man here is a known identity broker. This woman specializes in creating offshore accounts. And this gentleman has connections to document forgers. So the accident just accelerated their timeline, I said. Exactly. When you were critically injured, they saw an opportunity. If you had died, they would have tried to claim your estate as your next of kin. When you survived, they pivoted to the mental incompetence strategy. I examined a photo of them entering a bank I didn't recognize. What's this? They've opened new accounts under shell companies. They're preparing to transfer your money and disappear. Derek tapped another photo showing my father at a travel agency. First-class tickets to Jakarta, as I mentioned before. One way. Working with Samuel and Derek, we formulated a plan. Rather than directly confronting the Mitchells or having them arrested immediately, we decided to set a trap. Samuel created a deliberate vulnerability in my financial security, a seeming loophole that would allow the Mitchells to believe they could access my main investment account with the right documentation. The bait is set, Samuel confirmed after making the arrangements. Now we wait. We didn't wait long. 3 days after I left the hospital, Madison's phone rang. It was Eleanor. "Madison, dear, we've been so worried. The hospital said Cassandra was discharged. Is she with you?" Madison put the call on speaker. "Yes, she's here. She's recovering." "Oh, thank goodness." We've been beside ourselves with worry. We tried to visit at the hospital, but they said immediate family only. The lie came smoothly from Eleanor's lips. "That's strange," Madison replied, her voice admirably steady. "They told me you hadn't been back since the first night." A brief silence. "There must have been some confusion. May we come see her? We're her parents, after all." The word parents made my stomach clench, but I nodded to Madison. "She's resting now, but you could come tomorrow afternoon," Madison said. "Wonderful. We'll be there around 2. After she hung up, Madison looked at me. "Are you sure about this?" I wasn't sure about anything anymore, but I nodded anyway. It's the only way to end this. That night, I barely slept. Nightmares plagued me, visions of the crash, of hospital ceilings, of Robert and Eleanor standing over my bed discussing my death. I woke repeatedly, drenched in sweat despite the air conditioning. It wasn't just the physical pain of my injuries that tortured me. It was the psychological wound of realizing my entire life had been a lie. The people I had loved, despite their flaws, despite the pressure and control, had never loved me at all. I had been an investment to them, a possession, a path to financial gain. And somewhere out there were my real parents, who had spent 28 years wondering what had happened to their baby girl. Madison found me crying at 4 a.m., struggling to reach the glass of water on my nightstand. "Hey," she said softly, handing me the water. "Bad night?" I nodded, wiping tears with my free hand. "I keep thinking about them coming here tomorrow. About facing them knowing what I know." Madison sat on the edge of the bed. "You don't have to go through with this. We could call the police now, tell them everything." "No," I said, handing back the empty glass. "I need to see their faces when they realize it's over. I need that closure." The next morning, we prepared. Derek installed discreet recording devices in Madison's living room. Samuel waited in the building's lobby, ready to intervene if necessary. Madison rearranged the furniture to accommodate my wheelchair and placed a hospital table nearby with my medications prominently displayed. "You should look vulnerable," Derek advised. "Let them think you're more impaired than you are." I wore a robe over pajamas, left my hair uncombed, and applied makeup to accentuate the dark circles under my eyes. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself, pale, gaunt from weight loss during my hospital stay, with fading bruises still visible on my face and arms. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Madison opened it to reveal Robert and Eleanor Mitchell, bearing flowers and a gift bag. "Madison, thank you for taking care of our daughter," Eleanor said, embracing Madison with false warmth. "We've been so worried." "She's in the living room," Madison replied, leading them in. I sat in my wheelchair, a blanket over my legs, looking appropriately fragile. When they entered, I forced myself to remain calm, to remember my role in this performance. "Cassandra, sweetheart," Eleanor rushed forward, kneeling beside my wheelchair. "We've been so concerned about you." "The hospital wouldn't give us any information," Robert added, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Patient privacy regulations. We've been calling every day." Another lie. The hospital had strict instructions to document all inquiries about my condition. There had been none from the Mitchells. "It's been hard," I said, deliberately slurring my words slightly. Everything hurts. Of course it does, darling. Eleanor stroked my hair in a gesture that once would have been comforting but now made my skin crawl. But you're getting good care? Madison has been wonderful, I said. The doctors say I'll recover eventually. Have they discussed long-term care options? Robert asked, a bit too eagerly. You might need specialized facilities, professional management of your medical decisions. And there it was, the first mention of control. I don't know, I said, feigning confusion. Everything's fuzzy sometimes. The medications. Eleanor and Robert exchanged a quick glance. We want to help with all of that, Eleanor said soothingly. Your father and I can manage everything until you're better. There's so much to consider, Robert added. Your condo, your research position, your finances. You shouldn't worry about any of that right now. I nodded weakly. I've been worried about money. The hospital bills. Don't think about that, Robert said quickly. Insurance will cover most of it, and we can help with the rest. My inheritance might help, I suggested, watching their expressions carefully. From grandmother. Another significant glance between them. Actually, sweetheart, Eleanor said, we should probably secure those funds properly. Make sure everything's protected during your recovery. I have documents, I murmured. In a safe deposit box. Robert leaned forward. What documents? For the accounts. The big investment account. I made a vague gesture. The key is in my purse. Madison brought my purse, and I fumbled through it, eventually producing a key with a bank's logo. This is for the main account, I said, handing it to Robert. Box 247 at First National Downtown. All the access information is there. Robert pocketed the key, trying to hide his excitement. We'll keep this safe for you. Should one of us stay with you? Eleanor asked Madison, clearly hoping the answer would be no. I've got her, Madison replied. The nurse visits twice daily, and she has physical therapy tomorrow. Well, we should let you rest then, Robert said, standing up. And we'll take care of these financial matters for you. One less thing for you to worry about. They left within 15 minutes, promising to return tomorrow with good news about my accounts. The moment the door closed behind them, I slumped in my wheelchair, emotionally exhausted. They didn't even try to hide it, Madison said, disgusted. They could barely wait to get their hands on that key. Derek is following them? I confirmed. Madison nodded. And the bank is ready. I wheeled myself to the window, watching as Robert and Eleanor hurried to their car. They didn't look back at the apartment building, not once. Their focus was entirely on their destination and the wealth they thought awaited them. They'll go straight to the bank, I predicted. An hour later, Derek called to confirm I was right. They went directly to First National. They're inside now. And so we waited. The bank manager had been instructed to allow them access to safe deposit box 247, which contained nothing but my letter. The police were positioned discreetly throughout the bank, ready to arrest them once they had clearly demonstrated their intent to commit fraud. My letter contained everything: the DNA test results proving I wasn't their daughter, evidence of their financial crimes, details of their plan to flee the country, and most importantly, the truth about my real identity as Emma Carpenter. Samuel called next. It's done. They've been arrested attempting to access your accounts with fraudulent documents. They had their passports and tickets to Jakarta in their possession. I closed my eyes, a complex wave of emotions washing over me. Relief. Vindication. Grief. Did they read the letter? I asked. Yes, Samuel confirmed. The bank's security cameras captured their reactions. I've never seen two people go from triumphant to terrified so quickly. That night, for the first time since the accident, I slept without nightmares. The details of the Mitchells' arrest filled in over the next day. According to Derek, who had contacts in the police department, they had entered the bank with barely contained excitement. The manager, who had been briefed on the situation, escorted them personally to the safe deposit vault. They used your key to open box 247, Derek explained as he sat in Madison's living room the next morning. According to witnesses, they were almost giddy, talking about catching their flight that evening and having everything resolved by then. I could picture it clearly, their eager hands opening the box, expecting to find account numbers and access codes to my inheritance. Instead, finding only a single envelope with my handwriting on the front, to Robert and Eleanor Mitchell. The security footage, which Derek had obtained, showed their expressions transforming as they read my words. By the time you read this, you'll realize your plan has failed. I know everything. I know I'm not your daughter. I know about the kidnapping. I know about Emma Carpenter. I know about your debts, your desperation, and your plan to steal my inheritance and flee the country. Asterisk. What you don't know is that while you were plotting to take everything from me, I was discovering the truth. DNA tests confirm I am Emma Carpenter, abducted from Providence, Rhode Island, on June 15, 1995. My real parents have been searching for me for 28 years. Asterisk. I also know about the money, the inheritance that wasn't from a grandmother, but from your elderly aunt who died when I was 10. The aunt who had no children of her own and who believed I was your biological daughter. You kept me because I was profitable. Asterisk. The police are reading this letter along with you. The evidence of your crimes, kidnapping, identity fraud, embezzlement, attempted grand theft, is overwhelming. You won't be going to Jakarta tonight. You won't be going anywhere for a very long time. Asterisk. You left me to die in that hospital room. You walked away from someone you claimed to love for 28 years. In doing so, you freed me from the last bonds of loyalty I felt toward you. This is goodbye, Robert and Eleanor. Or whatever your real names might be. Asterisk. Cassandra Mitchell, Emma Carpenter. Asterisk. The security cameras had captured Robert's face draining of color as he read. Eleanor had begun to shake, grabbing his arm with white-knuckled fingers. They had looked up to find themselves surrounded by police officers. They didn't go quietly, Derek said with a hint of satisfaction. Robert tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding. Eleanor actually attempted to swallow some documents she had in her purse, papers she'd forged with your signature, authorizing them to access your accounts. Madison shook her head in disgust. 28 years of pretending to be parents, and they couldn't even fake remorse when caught. I sat quietly, absorbing it all. There was a strange emptiness inside me where anger should have been. Perhaps I was still in shock, or perhaps I had already begun to move beyond them in my mind. What happens now? I asked Samuel, who had joined us for this update. They're being held without bail, he replied. The charges are substantial: kidnapping, fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, attempted grand larceny. The evidence is overwhelming. Their properties have been searched, and investigators found extensive documentation of their financial crimes, including their plans to disappear with your money. And the Carpenters? I asked, my voice catching slightly on the name of my biological family. Samuel's expression softened. I've been in touch with their attorney. They're overwhelmed. They never gave up hope, but after 28 years, this is understandably a shock. They'd like to contact you when you're ready. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The reality of having a whole other family, a real family, waiting to meet me was still too enormous to fully comprehend. The next day, Samuel arranged for me to visit the Mitchells at the detention center. Madison thought it was a terrible idea, but I needed this final confrontation, needed to look them in the eyes as myself, not as the vulnerable daughter they thought they could manipulate. The visit was arranged in a private room with glass separating us. Derek insisted on coming with me, standing behind my wheelchair as emotional support and protection. Robert and Eleanor entered wearing orange jumpsuits, handcuffs linking their wrists. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by their circumstances or perhaps by the stripping away of their facades. I picked up the phone that would allow us to speak. After a moment's hesitation, Eleanor did the same on her side. Why? I asked, the single word containing all my questions, all my pain. Eleanor's eyes darted to Robert, seeking guidance as she always had. He nodded slightly. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she began, her voice thin through the connection. "We never intended to keep you permanently. We were paid to take you," Robert continued, leaning toward the glass. "By my Aunt Margaret. She couldn't have children of her own. Her husband had died, and she was desperate for a child to raise." "So you stole someone else's baby?" I asked incredulously. "We were in debt even then," Eleanor said, as if that explained everything. "Margaret offered us a way out. We were supposed to bring you to her in Boston, but she had a stroke the day before the handoff. She survived, but she couldn't take care of a baby anymore. So you kept me," I said flatly. "Like unwanted merchandise." "We did raise you," Robert insisted. "We gave you every advantage. The best schools, the best opportunities. You raised me to maximize my value," I corrected him. "The inheritance from Aunt Margaret when she died. The prestigious career that would support you in your retirement. I was never your daughter. I was your investment." Eleanor had the decency to look away, but Robert's expression hardened. "You have no idea what it cost us to raise someone else's child," he said coldly. "We deserved compensation. And when I was critically injured, when I might have died without surgery, what did you deserve then?" Neither answered. "Did you ever love me?" I asked, hating the vulnerability in my voice, but needing to know. "Even for a moment?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but Robert's remained cold. "We did what we had to do," he said. "Love was never part of the equation." I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. "Thank you for your honesty, finally. I won't be visiting again." I hung up the phone and turned my wheelchair away, refusing to give them a final glance. Derek followed me out, his hand supportive on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked as we left the building. "No," I admitted. "But I will be." That evening, I asked Madison to help me with something important. "I'd like to call them," I said. "The Carpenters. My real parents." She smiled gently. "I think that's a good idea." With trembling fingers, I dialed the number Samuel had provided. After 3 rings, a woman's voice answered, warm, slightly breathless, as if she'd rushed to the phone. "Hello, Mrs. Carpenter? This is Emma." There was a sharp intake of breath, then a sob. "Emma? Oh my God, Thomas. Thomas, it's her." And then I was crying too, 28 years of separation collapsing in an instant as a mother heard her daughter's voice for the first time since infancy. For 3 days after that first phone call, I spoke with Catherine and Thomas Carpenter daily. Each conversation was emotionally overwhelming, filled with tears, questions, shared grief over lost years, and cautious joy at finding each other again. They were patient, never pushing me to move faster than I felt comfortable with, understanding the magnitude of what I was processing. "We want to meet you," Catherine said during our 4th call. "But only when you're ready. We've waited 28 years. We can wait a little longer." I had been struggling with the idea of meeting them in person. Part of me was desperate to see my real parents, to find the missing pieces of myself in their faces and mannerisms. Another part was terrified. What if there was no connection? What if they were disappointed in who I had become? "I'd like that," I said finally. "But I'm still recovering. I can't travel yet." "We'll come to you," Thomas said immediately. "Just say the word." After consulting with my doctors and therapists, both physical and psychological, I set a date for 2 weeks later. It would give me time to continue healing, to prepare emotionally, and to learn more about the Carpenters before our face-to-face meeting. During those 2 weeks, we exchanged emails and photos. I learned about my biological siblings, James, 25, and Lily, 23, both born after my abduction. They had grown up knowing about their missing older sister, seeing my baby pictures on the mantle, participating in the annual remembrance events the family held on my birthday. "They can't wait to meet you," Catherine wrote. "James says he always felt your absence, even though you were gone before he was born. Lily has been collecting things to show you for years, drawings she made for you as a child, her favorite books she wanted to share with her big sister. The thought of siblings. Real siblings who wanted to know me, not because of what I could do for them, but simply because I was family, was another adjustment to my understanding of the world. As the meeting date approached, my anxiety increased. Madison helped me prepare my appearance, my hair freshly cut, my outfit carefully chosen to be both comfortable for my still healing body and presentable for this momentous occasion. "You look beautiful," she assured me as I fretted before the mirror. "And they're going to love you no matter what you wear." When the doorbell rang, my heart seemed to stop. Madison squeezed my hand before going to answer it. I heard voices in the entryway, Madison introducing herself, offering to take coats, the murmur of nervous responses. Then footsteps approaching the living room where I waited in my wheelchair, my hands twisting anxiously in my lap. They appeared in the doorway, and time seemed to suspend. Catherine Carpenter was petite with auburn hair threaded with silver, her green eyes, my eyes, wide with emotion. Thomas was tall with a gentle face, his brown hair receding slightly at the temples. Both were frozen, staring at me as if I might disappear if they blinked. "Emma," Catherine whispered, the name falling from her lips like a prayer. I had thought I was prepared, but the surge of emotion that swept through me was overwhelming. Something deep within me recognized them, not a memory, exactly, but a sense of belonging I had never experienced before. "Hi," I managed, my voice barely audible. Catherine moved first, approaching slowly as if afraid to frighten me. She knelt beside my wheelchair, her eyes never leaving my face. "May I?" she asked, her hands hovering uncertainly. I nodded, and she gently took my face in her hands, examining every feature with wonder. "You have my mother's chin," she said softly. "And Thomas's eyebrows. But mostly, you look like you. Like the woman I always imagined you would become." Thomas joined her, kneeling on my other side. His eyes were filled with tears. "We never stopped looking," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not for a single day." I hadn't expected the physical resemblance to be so striking. Catherine's gestures as she spoke were eerily familiar, the same way I moved my hands. Thomas had my exact smile, the right corner lifting slightly higher than the left. "I don't know what to call you," I admitted. "I'm still getting used to being Emma." "Call us whatever feels comfortable," Catherine said. "We're just grateful to be here with you." The next few hours passed in a blur of conversation, tears, and cautious laughter. They shared stories of my early infancy, how I had been a colicky baby who only settled when Thomas sang Beatles songs, how I had learned to roll over weeks earlier than expected, how my first word had been book. They showed me photos from before the abduction. Images of myself I had never seen, held in the arms of these people who had loved me from my first breath. There was a tenderness in the way they handled these photographs, these precious artifacts of our brief time together. "This was the day before," Catherine said quietly, showing me a picture of baby Emma of me, wearing a yellow sundress, sitting in a garden. "It was a beautiful day. We had a picnic in the backyard. You fell asleep on a blanket under the apple tree." "The next photo would have been taken the following weekend," she explained. But by then, I was gone. I shared my own story, the edited version, sparing them the worst details of the Mitchells' psychological manipulation. I told them about my research, my education, my friends like Madison who had become my chosen family. "You've accomplished so much," Thomas said proudly. "Despite everything, we've missed so many firsts," Catherine added, her expression momentarily clouding with grief. "First steps, first day of school, graduation. But we don't have to miss any more," Thomas reminded her gently. As the evening progressed, we began to relax with each other. The initial overwhelming emotion gave way to something more sustainable, a tentative but genuine connection that felt both new and somehow ancient. When they finally prepared to leave, they were staying at a hotel nearby and would return tomorrow. Catherine hesitated. "We brought something for you," she said, reaching into her purse. "You don't have to use it if you don't want to. We'll understand." She handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a small apple tree. "I've worn one just like it every day since you were taken," she explained, showing me her wrist where an identical bracelet rested. "The apple tree from our yard where we had our last day together. I had this one made for you years ago, hoping someday I could give it to you." I fastened it around my wrist, the metal cool against my skin. "Thank you. It's perfect." Over the next few weeks, as my physical recovery progressed, my relationship with the Carpenters developed as well. James and Lily came to visit, the four of us discovering the peculiar experience of being siblings who were strangers yet connected by blood and shared features. Lily, an art teacher, recognized my paintings immediately. "You're talented," she said, scrolling through photos of my work on my phone. "I can see your emotions in every brushstroke." James, a software engineer, shared my analytical mind and dry humor. We fell into an easy rapport as if we'd known each other our entire lives. Meanwhile, the legal case against the Mitchells proceeded. They had been formally charged with kidnapping, fraud, identity theft, and attempted grand larceny. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and prosecutors were confident of a conviction. I testified at preliminary hearings, recounting their abandonment at the hospital and their subsequent attempt to steal my inheritance. The media picked up the story. Of course, it had all the elements of a sensational crime drama. "Kidnapped heiress reunites with real family after 28 years," blared one headline. The publicity was uncomfortable, but the Carpenters helped shield me from the worst of it, having experienced media attention during the original investigation decades earlier. We gave one carefully controlled interview to a respected journalist, then declined all other requests. "Your story belongs to you," Thomas told me, "not to them." As weeks turned to months, I gradually began to reclaim my life, a new life, with a new understanding of who I was. I legally changed my name to Emma Cassandra Carpenter, honoring both my birth identity and the person I had become. My recovery progressed, from wheelchair to walker to cane. Physical therapy was grueling but effective. By the 6-month mark after the accident, I was walking with only a slight limp that doctors expected would continue to improve. I returned to my research with a new perspective, focusing specifically on trauma recovery treatments. My experience had given me insights that textbooks couldn't provide, and my work took on new dimensions. Through it all, my circle of support remained steadfast: Madison, who had been there from the beginning, Nurse Grace, who had become a dear friend, Derek and Samuel, who had helped uncover the truth, and now the Carpenters, my biological family who had never stopped hoping for my return. The trial of Robert and Eleanor Mitchell began exactly 1 year after my accident. As I prepared to face them in court one final time, I realized I had found something I never expected: healing. 2 years have passed since the night my car spun out in the rain, since I woke in a hospital to overhear the people I called parents disowning me and plotting to steal my inheritance. 2 years since I discovered my entire life had been built on an abduction and a lie. 2 years of rebuilding my body, my identity, my understanding of family and belonging. The physical recovery was the easiest part, surprisingly. Bones mend according to predictable patterns. Physical therapy, though painful, follows established protocols with measurable progress. My body healed itself with remarkable efficiency, leaving only a slight unevenness in my gait and scars that fade a little more each year. The emotional recovery has been more complex. There are still nights when I wake in a cold sweat, fragments of nightmares clinging to my consciousness. Hospital ceilings, Robert's cold voice saying, "She's not our real daughter," the realization that my entire childhood had been a calculated investment rather than an act of love. But those nights grow less frequent. The nightmares are gradually replaced by dreams of apple trees, of family dinners with the Carpenters, of possibilities I never knew existed. The trial of Robert and Eleanor Mitchell concluded 6 months ago. They were convicted on all counts: kidnapping, fraud, identity theft, attempted grand larceny, and conspiracy. Robert received 35 years without possibility of parole. Eleanor, who ultimately cooperated with prosecutors, received 28 years, 1 year for each year they kept me from my real family. I attended their sentencing hearing, watching from the gallery as they stood before the judge in their orange jumpsuits, diminished and defeated. When offered the opportunity to make a victim impact statement, I approached the podium with steady steps. What Robert and Eleanor Mitchell stole from me cannot be measured in years or dollars, I told the court. They took my history, my identity, my connection to a family that loved me. They raised me not as a daughter, but as an investment with an expected return. I paused, looking directly at them for the first time since our confrontation at the detention center. But they failed in one crucial aspect of their plan. They couldn't take my humanity, my capacity for growth, or my ability to find my way back to truth. I am standing here today not as their victim, but as a survivor who has reclaimed her life. Then I said the words that had taken me months of therapy to genuinely mean, I forgive you, not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. My name is Emma Cassandra Carpenter, and I am finally free. Their expressions never changed. Robert remained stoic, Eleanor kept her eyes downcast. Neither showed remorse. But I hadn't expected them to. My forgiveness wasn't for them, it was for me, a final release of their power over my life. Building a relationship with my biological family has been a journey of discovery and adjustment. Catherine and Thomas, who I now comfortably call Mom and Dad, have been patient beyond measure, never pushing me to conform to expectations or make up for lost time. We're creating new memories now, Mom often says when the grief of missed milestones threatens to overwhelm us. Every day together is a gift we never thought we'd have. My siblings, James and Lily, have become my closest friends and strongest advocates. James, with his technical expertise, helped me establish the Emma Carpenter Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting families of missing children and providing resources for those who, like me, are recovered after long absences. Lily, with her artistic sensibility, encouraged me to return to painting, the passion the Mitchells had dismissed as impractical. Under her gentle guidance, I've rediscovered the joy of creative expression, the meditative peace of brush on canvas. My first exhibition opens next month, featuring works that chronicle my journey from trauma to healing. Dad, a counselor who specialized in grief therapy long before my return, has been instrumental in developing psychological support protocols for the foundation. His insights, both professional and deeply personal, have shaped our approach to helping families navigate the complex emotions surrounding abduction and recovery. My research work continues as well, though with a shifted focus. The cancer treatment protocol I was developing before the accident has been handed off to capable colleagues, while I've redirected my expertise toward trauma recovery and neurological resilience. The inheritance that the Mitchells coveted now funds a research center dedicated to helping survivors of traumatic injuries rebuild their lives. Madison remains my rock, the friend who stood by me through the darkest hours and celebrated each small victory along the way. She officially joined the foundation last year as our outreach director, bringing her organizational skills and boundless compassion to our growing team. Nurse Grace, whose intervention quite literally saved my life that first night in the hospital, now serves on our medical advisory board, helping develop training for healthcare professionals to recognize and respond to suspicious family dynamics. Derek and Samuel, the investigator and attorney who helped uncover the truth, have become trusted advisors and friends. Their expertise continues to guide our work with law enforcement and the legal system. I still go by Cassandra professionally. It's the name under which I built my career and reputation. But personally, I've embraced Emma, the name my real parents gave me, the identity that was stolen and now reclaimed. The duality feels right somehow, honoring both who I was forced to become and who I was meant to be. Last month, on the second anniversary of the accident, I visited the crash site for the first time. The guardrail has been repaired, the broken glass long since swept away. Standing there in the gentle spring sunshine, I felt not fear or trauma, but profound gratitude. That night of destruction became, against all odds, a night of revelation and ultimately of liberation. Afterward, I drove to the cemetery where Margaret Mitchell, Robert's aunt, the woman who had commissioned my kidnapping but never received her stolen child, is buried. I placed a single white lily on her grave, not in forgiveness exactly, but in acknowledgement of the complex web of desperation, desire, and damaged ethics that entangled my life with hers. I've learned that identity is both more fragile and more resilient than I ever understood. It can be falsified on paper, manipulated through lies, obscured by deception. But our true selves persist beneath the surface, waiting to be recognized and reclaimed. The letter I left for the Mitchells in that safe deposit box was my first act of reclamation, the moment I stopped being their possession and became my own person. Each day since has been another step in that journey, another piece of myself recovered and reimagined. If there's one lesson I've learned through all of this, it's that truth has a gravity all its own. It may be diverted, delayed, or disguised, but eventually it finds its way back to the surface. The Mitchells thought they had buried my true identity forever, but some truths cannot remain hidden. Not for 28 years, not forever. I've also learned that family is defined not by blood or legal documents, but by love freely given without expectation of return. The Carpenters waited nearly 3 decades for a daughter they never stopped loving. Madison stood by my hospital bed when those who should have cared most walked away. Grace fought for a patient she'd just met because it was the right thing to do. These are the bonds that matter, the connections that heal and sustain us. My story is still being written, as all our stories are. There are still difficult days, moments when the weight of what was stolen threatens to overwhelm me. But those moments no longer define me. I am Emma Cassandra Carpenter, daughter, sister, friend, survivor, scientist, artist. I am the sum of what was taken and what was found, what was broken and what was healed. And I am, at last, truly free. If my story has touched you in any way, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever discovered something about yourself or your past that changed how you see your identity? How did you handle it? Please like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories of resilience and transformation, and share this video with someone who might need to be reminded that our pasts don't define our futures. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the truth always finds its way to the light.